Hey guys, welcome back to the Tech Media Maven YouTube channel. Remember, here at Tech Media Maven, we're all about making tech simplified. So, we're continuing off from where we stopped in our last episode, which had to do with data entry and editing. Now, we're going to be focused on data analysis, and specifically, we're going to be looking at formulas and functions. So, I'm using the same Excel sheets that we used when working on the data entry and editing, like I promised. But for those who probably haven't gone through that video and are just starting from this video, I'm going to attach the file as a link as well so that you could download and also follow along. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to now change the name of this sheet to data analysis. Okay, and I will save my document as data analysis. Okay, now if you remember the storyline I had given in the past video, or if you didn't watch the past video, I'm going to run it again. This are a bunch of students who went for their internship, and during the internship they were permitted to work and earn based on how many hours they worked. So we documented staff documented all these people and has been able to create an Excel sheet. There's some form of database for the students. Now, the admin staff wants to go ahead and derive some insights from the data, because I look at data as crude oil. But data on its own, unrefined, is like crude oil. Now, the process of data analysis seems more like taking crude oil to a refinery. And in the process of refining crude oil, you get several extras like petrol, diesel, kerosene, and petroleum jelly, and what have you. So the process of data analysis on data helps us gain more insights and knowledge about our data. And some of these insights could also be used to make more informed decisions. So today we're going to be focused on formulas and functions. But before we go into that, let me first of all make our data more interesting by editing some of these R's so that it makes the analysis not to look totally the same. Don't worry, I would add the link so that for those of you that probably would prefer not to type, the link will be added. So I'm just changing the hourly wage essentially so that it reflects some of the things. Well, some people are really earning really poorly here. I'm so sorry. So sorry. Okay. Now that we've done that, let's first of all define what is a formula. Now, a formula is essentially a set of instructions, a set of mathematical instructions given to Excel to perform an operation. It's similar to an equation. So the formula always, and remember what I'm saying, always, the formula always starts with an equals to sign, which means you're telling Excel that this particular cell, it's equals to this set of instructions that I'm about to give you. Now do the calculation and tell me the answer. So we're going to start with this. Ikenna is in the Maths and Computer Science department. He has an hourly wage of $15.5 per hour. Sorry, I should have actually put the symbol there. $15.5 per hour. And he spent 170 hours working per month. Now, the first insight we want to know is, what did Ikenna earn in total? Now, it's a no-brainer how to figure this out. You essentially want to multiply the amount he got for each hour times the number of hours he spent in the month. So with that, we use the Excel formula. Now, a formula can either be put inside the actual cell, which is here, or you select the cell and put the formula in what is known as the formula bar. Yes, but for now, let's start with inside the cell. So you double click inside the cell, and remember, say we start with an equals to sign. Now, what do we want to calculate? We want to calculate his hourly wage, which in this case is 15.5, and the number of hours, which is 170. So I'm going to show you two ways which you can use the formula. You could either use it in a manual approach, or you could use it in an automatic approach. So the manual approach in this case now will be, I type 15.5, and the asterisk, the star symbol is what is used as the multiplier in computers or in Excel. And I type 175. It's 170, sorry. So it gives me my answer. $2,635. That was what he earned at the end of the entire exercise based on the data of what he worked with. Okay, now if we are to go by this, let's first of all try something. I showed you how to use the autofill function in the previous video. So the autofill function essentially denotes the pattern and uses that pattern to fill all the corresponding cells that I highlight subsequently. So I want to try and use the autofill function and see if I can fill all these other cells up to number 16, which is Rihanna. And wow, it actually does fill it. I'm not going to lie. But the question is, does it fill it with the accurate data? Because now I see a parallel 2,635 written from the top to bottom. And if I click on any of them, what I see in the formula bar here is 15.5 times 170, which I only wanted in the first cell, but it seemed to have duplicated it to all the cells. So now this is not what I wanted. And it means if I wish to actually do this the manual way, I have to come and be editing each of this. So for instance, this, I change it from 15.5 and I change it to 14, which is seen at the hourly wage, 14 times 170, and you get what now changes to 2,380. But this is really going to be tedious if I want to do this for a large data set. So now what do? We use the automatic formula option. Now I'm going to go back to the status quo by using Ctrl Z to clear all I've done. And now let me show you how to use the automatic formula. So like I said, either the manual or the automatic, any which way, you're starting with an equals to sign. So I press equals to, and I use my cursor to select the cell I wish to calculate. In this case, 15.5 is cell D2. And I multiply it. In short, I don't even need to click on it. I could even type it manually. So for instance, 170 is on cell E2. So I could actually just type E 2. And notice that unlike other cells, there is a blue selection and a red selection here to indicate what I have just captured, to show me if it's the actual cells I intended to capture, and I press enter. Voila! Notice the amount is still the same, 2,635. But this time, if you click on the cell, what you see in the formula bar isn't 15.5 times 170. Rather, what you see in the formula bar is a cell reference, cell D2 times cell E2. Now, what is the advantage of this over the manual method? Well, we're about to find out with the autofill tool. So, I'm going to try using the autofill tool again by coming to the bottom right corner. Just in case, if you notice at the bottom right corner, you see a small box that is different from the regular borderline. And you click on that box and drag it down to where you want to stop your calculation. And voila! It fills it up. And now notice all the numbers are different. Well, apart from number 1 and number 3, which speaks to Ikenna and John, they seem to have worked for the same amount and the same number of hours. But every other thing is different. So let's try and verify with a couple of cells. Okay, you see this? D17 times E17, D16 times E16. So yes, this was accurate, and you can try and verify this by doing your own manual calculation to see you realize that Excel didn't actually make a mistake in any of the calculations. So now this brings me to this automatic form of using the formula. It's called the relative formula. What we just performed now is called the relative formula. There are 2 ways of using the Excel automatic formula tool. Remember, the manual way is if I input the figure myself and press multiply by and input the other figure. But if I wish to use the Excel cell referencing method, there are 2 ways to use the Excel cell referencing methods when calculating with the formula bar. The first way is what is known as the relative formula. The relative formulas. So why is it called relative? Well, I'm going to show you something else. And in this other part of the tutorial, you see the second form of using cell referencing formulas. Then I will now explain why it's called relative and why the other one has the name it has. So, to do that, we've calculated the total income. Let's go a step further. And as law-abiding citizens, these people pay taxes. Now, we create a column for tax. And we want to know, based on this total income, remember, now we're refining the data. We've used the raw data and refined it and gotten the total income. But we want to go a step further. We want to know how much did these people pay in taxes. And in this particular environment they found themselves, we are assuming that the tax was 5%. Okay, so if it is 5%, the question is, what is 5% of $2,635? Now, it's as simple as saying multiply $2,635 by 5%. So, we're going to try with what we learned earlier. We click on equals to, I click on the cell F2, which contains the 2,635, and I put my star symbol, which represents the multiply, and come down to 5% and click on it. And now I click, voila, okay. And it gives me the amount, 131.75. And I don't doubt that that is actually the tax that would be paid if the tax was to be 5%. Now, remember, we're all about trying to find the easiest ways to do things. So let's see if we are to use the autofill function to replicate this across all the other cells, what do we get? Oh my goodness. 0. Hey, what happened here? Who can tell me what happened? Oh, that's true. I can't hear you. Okay, but what actually happened was this. If we click on Rihanna, for instance, which is row number 16, and click on the formula bar, we see that the cell reference it chose was F17, which is this, and G37, which is this. And let's say we go to Ronaldo, which is number 5, and click on it, and click on the formula bar. We notice what it chose was F6, which is this, and G26, which is here. So, what is the solution to this problem? Now, the solution to this problem is a different form of cell referencing, of using the formulas with cell referencing called absolute formulas. Remember what we had done here? We use what we call relative formulas. But now, what we want to do here is we want to multiply all these figures by this 5%, not with any other cell, this particular cell that contains 5%. So it brings us to the concept of absolute referencing. Now, let me go into more details about absolute and relative referencing. Relative referencing, like the name implies, means the cell calculation is relative to the position where the calculation is to be taking place. So in this case, the calculation D2 and E2 is relative to this row. By the time I copy this formula and paste it here, it becomes relative to a new row, which is row 3. So another way to think of this is, imagine I'm a car dealer and 2 or 3 clients come to my shop to purchase a car. There's every chance that the amount I'll give them as a price is relative to how I weigh them and how I feel they can afford the price I'll call. So if I see a well-dressed gentleman coming out from a Lamborghini, psychologically I'll probably be like, well, if he can afford a Lamborghini, maybe I could top my selling price with a few extra $1,000. And now that price, which I tell him, is relative to how deep I feel his pocket is. If someone comes again and they gave me the impression that they're a student, because I'm still a business person and I actually do want to sell my product, I will give them a much cheaper price relative to how I feel their pockets are. But now, if I were to go to a standard supermarket, let's say Walmart, Spar, whichever supermarket is dominant in your region, and you go to the shelf to purchase something, the price you see there is absolute. A jug of milk or a can of soda could be, let's say, $1 or $2, and that's absolute, irrespective of who is coming to purchase that product. The price is absolute, it doesn't change. So that is the concept of relative formulas and absolute formulas. Absolute formulas are when you are trying to use the formula in such a way that the value it is using to calculate doesn't change irrespective of where it is copied to, while relative formulas changes in relation to the cell in which it is pasted on. So how do we change this particular cell from a relative formula to an absolute formula? Well, first of all, we just want to change one value, which is the value that has 5%. We want the value of 5% to become absolute. And we want this cell F2, which is the total income, to still remain relative. So that by the time I copy this formula to the next line, it becomes F3, which means it is now in relation to this line. And I copy it to this other line, it becomes F4 because it's now in relation to the fourth row. So what we do is, where you have this G22, which speaks to the 5%, in front of the G, we put a dollar symbol, and in front of 22, we put another dollar symbol, which means we're locking column G, cell 22. We're locking it and turning it into an absolute cell. Now we press enter, and notice the figure doesn't change. It's still 131.75. But what happens when we now use the autofill tool and try to paste it across the entire data range? Wham! Wham! Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Now, the figure has changed. The figure has transformed. And it is now in context to each cell. Each cell, if you look at this cell now, let's say Frank, and click on the formula bar, you notice the relative cell changed, which is the F column. It changed to F14. But the absolute cell we wanted, which is G22, remains the same. We check another cell. We check number 6, Mercy, and number 7, Mercy. F7, and the absolute cell remains the same, which is G22. So now I've learned how to use 3 different types of formulas. The first was the manual method, where we're actually doing the manual calculation ourselves. And the second was the automatic method, which is categorized in 2 forms: the relative formula and the absolute formula. Okay, I really do hope we're all following and we're all excited with how much we've learned from these few illustrations. Now we'll jump right into the next one, which is functions. What is a function? Now, a function, essentially, it's a predefined formula. A function is a predefined formula. Now, let me backtrack a bit. A formula is a set of instructions, mathematical instructions given to Excel to calculate. It usually starts with an equals to sign. So it's like an equation. Remember, back then when we were younger, or maybe some of us still, depending on the level you find yourself, the concept of equations, you see things like x is equals to 2 plus 5. Y is equals to 3 plus 4. Those are equations. That's essentially what you're doing in Excel. In this case, we said F2 is equals to D2 times E2. F3 is equals to D3 times E3. So that is a formula. Now, under the formulas, we talked about relative and absolute. But now for a function is a predefined formula. So what happened is, there are certain calculations that are so common that Excel had to create some form of dictionary out of these calculations and make them functions so that they are easy for those who wish to utilize them. So now let's go into trying to find out how to utilize functions. So let's imagine that we have been able to gain so much from this little analysis so far, but we want to go a step further. We want to do things like find insights into what was the total hourly wage that was earned, or maybe not the total hourly wage, what was the total income by all the students and what was the total tax by all the students. Let's start with what was the total income. Now, there are two ways to find this. Either you go to the formula category and go to the sum here and click on it. Now the sum, if you notice, automatically captured all the information above this cell. So Excel is programmed in such a way that this function is able to understand that I want to calculate the sum, and there are a list of numerical data above where I wish to calculate the sum. So it assumes that maybe this is the range of cells I wish to calculate. I could always alter it. I don't need to follow it. I could, in case I wish to calculate just a fraction of it, let's say I wish to stop at number 8, which is variant, I could highlight it and stop there. Or I could also come to the formula bar and manually alter it to whichever cell I feel is deemed fit. So I could change it from F9 to, let's say, F12 or 13. And you notice how it highlights up to here. If I increase it to 14, it takes a step further. 15, another step further. 16, another step further. And 17, which is all that I wish to capture. Now, if I click on enter, voila. Notice how it has calculated both the total for this and, well, also went as far as calculating the tax because my autofill highlighted up to this area. But maybe, well, yeah, we would like to verify something now. Now we realize that it taxes this with the same 5%, and it tells us the tax for this amount will be 1376. Well, let's try the total sum function here and see whether we'll still get the 1376. So I delete this, make it empty, and go to the sum and click on it. Click enter, and as you can see, 1376. So that's actually correct. So notice something. Let me backtrack a bit. This is 1376, but we can achieve it with two ways. The first way, if you come to this formula bar, was through using the formula F18, which is where our total income is for everybody, times the percentage, which is where G22, which is the tax, the tax. And after doing the calculation, we got 1376. Or we can use the function of the sum of everybody's tax, which was what we just did. We click on the sum and highlight everybody's tax. Everybody's tax, and click enter. And you have the same 1376. So you see the interesting part, how these two tools overlap. Okay, now let's probably create a new column here, insert, and write total over here. So we want to find out something else. Okay, let's clear this total. Now, want to use the function and find out something else from here. In this data highlighted here, we want to know who got paid the most, who earned the highest amongst everybody here. Well, intuitively, you might look at it and figure out the answer. But imagine this was a column that contained about 2,000 cells. Will you also be able to look at every one of the 2,000 and comfortably tell which one was the highest? I'm not sure. So now it brings us to the next part of the function which we can use called the max. So if you look at under this, you have the max. There are several other functions. These are the most common functions. That's why they were highlighted here. But I believe there are way more functions that Excel has than this. So if you click on the max, Excel automatically, as usual, detects where our data range is. But supposing this was not what we wanted to work with, we can limit it to wherever we wish to. But for now, we want to work with everything. And we click enter. So it tells us the maximum number of hours. The maximum wage was 20. And as you can see, 20 by Hannah. Okay. Now, we clear that. What if we want to find out something again? What was the minimum? We come here, minimum. It highlights everything automatically. We click enter. And the minimum was 5. And if you actually do look at it, you don't see anything less than 5 for Beckham. Wow. Okay. Now, we might also want to go as far as finding what was the average amount of the average amount earned per hour. So it still highlights everything we want, and you will see the average is $12.7 per hour. We can also repeat these calculations for these cells. We can even come as far as a fresh cell, so that Excel, in case you're getting confused with how Excel automatically detects our data, we could try it in a fresh cell and use the number of hours spent working per month. We'll come here and we want to know what was the average number of hours spent working per month. Now I can manually highlight where I wish for it to calculate, and voila, it gives me. So I could just write average hours spent working, and increase this average hours spent working. If I want to also know the minimum hours spent working and the maximum hours spent working. Now, there's something interesting we'll also try and work with. I might want to maybe do a calculation that is different, and I want to know how many people actually spent hours working. So now I'm not interested in the total. I want to know how many of them actually committed hours to work. So let's say I go through this data and realize that Rihanna, at the end of the day, we thought she spent 90 hours working, but actually she didn't spend any amount of time working. She probably was promoting Fenty or something. So I update the data and put 0. Realize how all the formulas have changed to 0. The answers in the formula bars have changed to 0, but the formulas are maintained. It's just the value has changed to 0. A real-time reflection of where we are in the calculation. Now I want to know how many people worked. In short, let me just clear and not put anything there. So, like I've already shown you, for the minimum hours worked, you come to the auto sum where you have the sum symbol and use the function min and highlight to know the number of hours worked. Notice how I also included both the empty cell that refers to Rihanna, and it says the minimum hours spent working was 33, which is true. Victoria, don't know why you commit such low hours. Okay, no problem. It's watching you. And now we have the maximum hours. I could actually do this a bit more manually without going through the part of selecting it from the auto sum. I could still use something similar to the formula bar by writing equals to. Remember, the function is just a predefined formula. The function is just a predefined formula, which means if the equals to sign is what you always use to start a formula, you could equally use the equals to sign to start a function. So in this case now, once I put equals to, and rather than typing a cell number, I'm typing the m, it already brings out the different functions that start with m. You can notice mean, median, and what have you, more complex mathematical functions. But in this case, I'm interested in the max. And it now brings up the argument from where to where to where do you wish to. And I come and I highlight all the cells that I would love to know where the max falls under. And it shows me 180, which is accurate. And this was the highest. Now, the next thing I want to know is how many people walked. So now there's a function called the count. It's like when you go to a class and you're taking attendance and you're doing a head count. So the idea is you want to know how many people are in the class. So you look at each desk and you look for who is sitting in front of the desk, and each person represents one unit. So I come here, and if you notice, there's count numbers. Click on it. Now count numbers is different from total. Bear in mind, all count does is if there is a value there, I'll count it as 1. If there is no value, I won't count it at all. So I come to where I wish for the count function to perform its maths, and I say enter. And notice, it tells me 15. But if I now update Rihanna and realize, oh, that's true, Rihanna actually did work for 2 hours, and I write 2. Notice, how many people worked has automatically changed to 16, because now I've indicated a value for Rihanna, and it has noted that as long as it's anything above 0, it means that is a valid number. It means that person worked in this context. So I want you to understand how these functions work. In future tutorials, I'll be going into more in-depth details on more advanced functions. So I would recommend that you stay tuned to this channel, like, subscribe, share if you haven't. I hope we're bringing you loads of value. So in the next video, we're going to be focusing on fine-tuning this data. Right now, the data looks, we've gotten a lot of refined information from the data, but we want to visualize it better and probably do some other calculations as well. So in order not to make this video too long, I will say stay tuned for the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We're always here to simplify tech for you, and the file to this data would also be available in the link so that you all can also follow through and do the analysis which you have seen me do. For now, Ike from Tech Media Maven is wishing you a lovely day, a lovely week, a lovely month, a lovely year. Bye.